Hello and welcome to the Gold, Ghosts, and Guns podcast for August 27th, 2024. My name is Tom Luongo, and we have a lot to talk about, and we do have a lot to talk about today. I have with me on the line my good friend Alex Krainer, who just published a great article and or video in support of his latest thesis, which I have to say, when I heard it yesterday, actually, for the first time on Vanessa Beeley's podcast, where he was a guest, I was stopped, stunned, and sat around and went, holy Jesus. You can read that article over at Alex's Substack at Alex Krainer's Trend Compass. And I'll have links to that below. Before we bring Alex on, I've got a couple of things I need to talk about. So I'll be speaking again this year at the Expat Money Show put on by Mikkel Thorup from October 7th through the 11th. This is a free event. I'll be speaking twice, once by myself and once as part of a panel with Alex Krainer and Bob Murphy, which was really, really cool. There will be people like Ron Paul, Doug Casey, Scott Horton, Tom Woods will be there, Mark Faber will be there. It should be an excellent show to help you learn everything you need to know about crafting a potential plan B if you need one, and if you're looking to preserve your liberty and your wealth at a time unknowable as the period of history that we're in right now. So this includes things like getting a second passport, diversifying your offshore finances, just investing in international real estate. All of these folks that will be there will be able to help you with that. So if you want to reserve your complimentary ticket, head over to expatmoneysummit.com and you can sign up there. We have a promo code, and the link will be in the show notes for this podcast. Also, I will be appearing at the Mises Supporter Summit in Hilton Head, South Carolina on October 10th through the 12th, where I'll be giving the keynote address on Saturday night. That's going to be a great time, honestly. I'm very, very much looking forward to speaking there and meeting all the people over at the Mises Institute who have had such a huge effect on my life and my career. So if you're interested in that, there will be links to the show note. There's a promo code that'll make the choice hopefully a little easier for you, and I hope to see everybody that weekend in Hilton Head. All right, so I'm going to bring Alex in now. Let's get started with the day. So, Alex, you and I are pretty famous now for saying that all roads lead to London, but is it maybe all fuses lead to London? Because that's what it sounds like you're arguing here. So take everybody through what you think you've uncovered here, and let's talk about it.
Well, I thought I'd lay out my observations. July and August have been extremely eventful, and all of these events had something very interesting in common, and that is the well understood impending default by Ukraine, which was expected at the end of July, and there was a frenzied activity around Ukraine's bond servicing and between Ukraine's and the Ukraine government and the Keir Starmer cabinet. Okay, so here's what's been happening, right? 2024 has been very bad for Ukraine. It's become clear that they cannot win in their war against Russia. And already in January, only 10% of people polled in Europe, on a sample of 17,000 people in 12 European countries, only 10% of them felt that Ukraine could win against Russia, which tells you that's the true believers, 10%, right?
Right.
All right, so things are looking bleak. And then the aid package gets stalled in U.S. Congress for months, the $61 billion aid package. And then in March, World Bank gives Ukraine a $1.5 billion loan. But what we learned from that is that World Bank thinks that Ukraine's state of finances is catastrophic, and that the risk of dealing with Ukraine is extreme. Meaning you can lend them money, but you're not going to see it back. That's basically, bank talk for that. And so there's a lot of anxiety between among the private bondholders who hold about $20 billion worth of previously issued Ukraine bonds. And when Russians launched their special military operations, these private bondholders granted Ukraine a 2-year grace period. So you don't have to service your debts for 2 years. That period expires when? It expired on the 1st of August, 2024. So 25 days ago, 27 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in May, according to Wall Street Journal, they start this discussion between this bondholder committee representing people like BlackRock, Amundi, PIMCO, and who knows who else. And they start negotiating with the Ukrainians because they're like, hey, you need to start servicing those bonds. You need to start paying at least the interest. And so the Ukrainians are like, we can't. But if you take a haircut like 60%, then maybe we can talk. And so there were negotiations going on. Ukrainians were demanding a 60% reduction in debts, and the bondholders were offering 20%, 22%.
Mm.
So this gets to July, and then on 12th July they have these intense negotiations, and by the 19th July they reach the agreement. Okay, so Ukraine is going to start restructuring their debts. There's going to be a 37% haircut for the bondholders. And this happens in London. On 18th July, Zelensky flies to London, where he recently appointed Valery Zaluzhny as his ambassador to London. Valery Zaluzhny used to be the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine before, in his previous lifetime. And he was very heavily involved in this war against Russia. And so on the 18th July, Saturday, or was that Friday? Doesn't matter. Zelensky flies into London, meets with Zaluzhny. Then he participates in some kind of a summit of something called European Political Community.
Okay.
Never heard. I don't know. But he gave a speech there. There were delegates of 44 other countries, predominantly European.
Right.
And interestingly, in that speech, Zelensky underscored how the UK has been way ahead of everybody else in supporting Ukraine. Interesting. The next day, he has an official meeting with Keir Starmer and his cabinet. He's invited to give a speech to his cabinet, which is a very rare honor. Last time this happened was in 1997, when Bill Clinton addressed Tony Blair's cabinet.
Right,
okay?
Tony Blair.
And so there's this gushing of love between, Zelensky government and Keir Starmer cabinet. And Zelensky gets a standing ovation, and it's Keir Starmer can't emphasize enough how extremely important this meeting is, and blah, blah, blah. Everything wonderful. All of this concludes, and then so that was Thursday and Friday. 18th was Thursday, 19th was Friday, July. 22nd July was Monday. So Zelensky's visit wraps up. He goes back to Ukraine. And then the first business day on Monday, Ukrainian government issues a press release stating that a deal has been reached with the bondholders.
Right.
37% haircut, and they're going to start servicing the interest on those bonds. So disaster averted. And then, to my mind, the most interesting event happens that 2 days later, literally on the 24th July, Fitch downgrades Ukraine from CC to C. Now, why is this spectacular? Because nobody expected Fitch to even conduct a credit ratings review until December 6th. for Ukraine.
Right.
And there are reasons why sovereign credit ratings reviews are done according to a certain protocol and according to a certain schedule.
Yes.
And so for them to breach this protocol and to bring forward the review by 6 months almost is, to my mind, like the idea that this was accidental is a snowball's chance in hell.
Right.
So, well, Fitch themselves said like that there was such a material change in the creditworthiness of the issuer that it would have been inappropriate for them to wait until the scheduled review in December.
Yeah, just on that point, Alex, before we go any farther with this is really important. Like, credit downgrades and or upgrades have marked very important things in the past. Let's talk about the U.S. losing its AAA rating when S&P did it during 2011, which prompted a whole bunch of major action afterwards. The blow off top in the gold market, the ushering in of the coordinated central bank policy 4 months later, because the Greek debt, we had Greek problems at that point. We had a Greek sovereign debt crisis. We had problems with Germany. We were all talking about Brexit at the time, if you remember correctly. So all of these things. So, and just one other thing, because I've talked to people like Lynette Zhang and others, and they all said the same thing, which is that the ratings agencies are all work for Wall Street and for and for the Federal Reserve. And so whatever policy they want to happen is what's going on here. So this is just to give people some background before we move on to all the other details which are really, really important. So go ahead.
Quite right. The credit ratings business is very political.
Absolutely.
It's very political. So to my mind, this was done by somebody who was able to pull strings and to make this happen. They basically torpedoed Ukraine and the UK and Europe along with it.
Exactly.
And I suspect that it was deliberate. So I would love to know who did it and why, but I think we're gonna converge on that in this conversation.
I'm just laughing because I guess it's not even, I don't even care who did it and why. What matters here is that it happened, and and that's what matters.
Because so the World Bank already in March determined that Ukraine is a disaster.
Right.
At the end of June, The Economist, which their unofficial tagline is, "Here's what the Rothschild clan wants you to think about the events in the world." Read this.
Yes, exactly.
As their unofficial tagline. So they published an article titled, "Ukraine has a month to avoid debt default." So pretty much everybody knew that this was going down. So for them, the imperative, the most important thing was to extend and pretend as far as possible. So this Ukraine government's press release, like, "Oh, we reached the deal with the bondholders, everything is good now," was just torpedoed by somebody via Fitch downgrade.
Right.
Downgrade from CC to C is also quite spectacular because C is a government that's in default already or is in a default-like process.
Right.
So that's 24th July. 31 July. And okay. And so back to the deal that was reached while Zelensky was in London, and the deal that was announced on Monday, 22 July. It was a preliminary agreement reached with an ad hoc committee of these bondholders. So it wasn't agreed to by all the bondholders. This was just something. And again, who was who was the government of Ukraine's financial advisors in these negotiations? Rothschild and Company. Okay, so Ukrainians were supposed to go back home and do their homework, which was they were supposed to chase up their bondholders and beg them to accept this deal.
Right.
And so they even had it was called through consent solicitation, and they even offered the bondholders who accepted the deal a 1.25% consent fee. So if you accept 1.25% to you, right?
Right.
A little, to lubricate the deal a little bit. Anyway, then Fitch torpedoes all this. And then on the 1 week later, on the 31st July, Zelensky signs a decree freezing Ukraine's servicing of external debt for 2 months,
Right.
or some reports said 3 months, whatever. It doesn't matter. You know what happens when people temporarily suspend something, like, I don't know, like Nixon temporarily suspended the convertibility of US dollars into gold 53 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, so
basically, no government policy is ever more permanent than when it's temporary.
Than the temporary one, yes. And so basically, and so this decree goes into effect 1st of August, exactly the day when the grace periods granted to Ukraine by these bondholders expires.
Right.
So, like the grace period expires and immediately the unilateral debt freeze by Ukraine goes into effect.
Right.
That's default, y'all.
Yes.
That is default. That's the definition of default. The fact that they say only for 2 months, for 3 months, what's going to change? Where are they going to come up with the money? And once you've done that, you're not going to sell another bond to anybody. You're done. You're finished. You're roadkill.
Yes.
Okay, so this happens. But then something else happens. On the 6th of August, so 6 days after this decree goes into effect, Ukraine launches an incursion into Kursk, into Russia. What the hell? Why? It doesn't make any sense. I listened to a number of podcasts by military people, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, Douglas McGregor, John Mersheimer. He's not a military person, but okay. Everybody's like, this doesn't make any sense at all. And of course that Russians were taken by surprise, because this is so idiotic. Why would you even prepare for such a thing? Okay, we can discuss that. There's other views on that. But anyway, the Ukrainians are losing the war in Donbass. And in the moment when they're losing the war in the Donbass, rather than reinforcing the troops there, defending, they take 10,000 of their best troop and gobs of equipment, and they send it into Russia to open a completely new front that doesn't make any sense at all, because A, you have no air cover. B, you're bringing these moving targets all over the place for the Russians to pick away, right? You have no reinforcements there. You have to yet to create reinforcements. You have nothing, and you have very fragile supply lines that can be attacked by the Russians at any time. So the whole thing is flash in the pan. But what did it achieve? It gave the West, because the West is managing this whole war through a narrative. The narrative is all important. It gave them a window of opportunity to create a new narrative. Oh my God, like they look how weak the Russians are. They took 10 billion square kilometers and 5 million villages and towns, and next they're going to be in Moscow. This is a turning point in the war.
Right.
So immediately the Council of Europe approves $4.2 billion in financial aid to Ukraine.
Yep.
The same day when they launched the incursion. And how did they justify this? The Council of Europe deferred to the European Commission. You know where that lady Ursula von der Leyen, she works there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you know it's a tight ship. There's no corruption or nothing there, right?
No, not at all. No.
And so the Council, the European Union, European Commission determined that the Ukrainians satisfactorily reformed their management of public companies and management of finances in the government, and this and this and that, like 9 different categories where Ukrainians were totally improving things and everything is good, so they can get $4.2 billion. Ukrainians just got a credit rating downgrade.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows they're bankrupt. And then a week after getting the credit rating downgrade, Ukraine defaulted and froze the servicing of external debt.
Yep.
So how did you determine that they qualify for these 4.2 billion from European Union? How did you work that out? I mean, I really hope that somebody's going to answer for that. Maybe von der Leyen knew something about this. Maybe she was in the loop. Who knows?
Well, what I just interject now, I think it was really obvious here, is that somebody wanted this to get paid, this outstanding, that the Ukraine's in default. These bonds need to be paid. There's $4.2 billion. That's interest on frozen Russian assets. That's what they use, right? Am I correct about that? Yeah. So this is just money laundering of Russian assets through quote unquote Ukraine in order to pay the bondholders who just got stiffed. That's what this looks like to me. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Whether it's coming from the Russian assets, I don't know. There's something called Ukraine facility.
Yeah. That's if I'm correct about that, I think that's the one that they put together in order to skim the interest off the frozen Russian assets.
Maybe, but they earmarked $50 billion to Ukraine in tranches over time. I don't know until 30 or whatever. I don't even know exactly, 2028 right. Maybe. But this money has been allocated for Ukraine months ago, I think in the beginning of the year, and they only paid out something which were, I don't know, there's a category, but it wasn't the regular payment. This was the first tranche of the regular payments they were supposed to. And so it was waiting for months. It wasn't being done. And then all of a sudden it gets done the day Ukrainians launch an incursion into Kursk.
Sure.
So somebody was doing a lot of hard footwork there. And I think that their princess of corruption, Ursula von der Leyen, played a role. I think she signed off on that, or at least twisted some arms to make sure that the money was approved, and it was paid out within a week. 13th August, the money was paid out. Now let's see what else happened on that end of July when Ukraine was expected to default, as announced by The Economist. And now, 30th July, the Israelis assassinate Fuad Shukr in Lebanon. Mm-hmm. The day later, the Israelis assassinate Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, the political leader of Hamas, who was negotiating between Hamas and Israel, and who was the last chance of a ceasefire.
Right. So,
when you mention fuses, I think this is what we're looking at. So, incursion into Kursk torpedoed completely any possibility of a negotiated settlement to the war, because there were efforts to negotiate the end to the war in Ukraine.
Yep.
And the Ukrainians were open to that. The Zelensky was open to that. There was, there was Orban who was working on it. There was a Chinese who were working on it. I don't know if the Turks were involved, but there was a lot of diplomatic footwork being done to get that war finished, to end it, to try to preserve as much of Ukraine as possible, and to bring the region to peace. So incursion into Kursk blew that out of the water.
Yes.
The assassinations in Lebanon and Tehran were clearly aimed at making sure that peace doesn't break out in the Middle East, that a negotiating solution between a ceasefire doesn't happen between Israel and Hamas, and that preferably there's a wider war escalation.
Right.
What else happened? Well, we had those stabbings of those 3 girls in Southport on the 29th July.
Yes. Yep.
Which were falsely attributed to a Muslim. And then they had these riots and clashes between Muslim immigrant communities and these, I don't know, people that Keir Starmer called right-wing thugs, right? But these riots and these clashes were very much exaggerated in the media and by the government officials, clearly with the view to justify very, very Orwellian crackdown on civil liberties and the freedom of speech in the UK, and to do it in a very publicized way, because they when was the last time you saw a judge handing out a sentence in England, and suddenly you had this judge sternly handing out a 20-month sentence to somebody for wrongthink, right? They were literally slamming people into prison for T-shirts.
Yes.
For quietly standing on the sidewalk and praying.
Yep.
For all kinds of insane reasons, like Orwellian shit, like insane stuff. So all of the and then wait, there's a World Health Organization on 13th August declares Mpox as a health emergency of international concern. Health emergency of international concern are the words that, when the WHO pronounces them, is meant to be a signal. Everybody goes into lockdown. All the pandemic measures are automatically enforced.
Right.
All the governments activate their, I don't know what you call these.
Emergency protocols, health protocols, whatever.
These expert bodies, like little expert, this cutout in the government that decides all the health measures, right?
Right.
Oh, you have to wear masks on the bus, and you can't go there, and you have to show this and you have to get tested to go there. All of this is supposed to happen.
Yes.
And then now, apparently, okay, so this didn't get much traction, but
nope.
Now they're claiming there's a resurgence of COVID. And apparently in England, I would have to look into, I think it was Daily Telegraph or Daily Mail or something. I saw that there was, it's on Twitter, saying that schools can't open this year and there's going to have to be lockdowns and blah, blah, blah. But they're talking about COVID. They can't make up their mind, Mpox didn't catch much traction. So then they're like, no, let's go with COVID. Let's go with COVID.
Right.
And then their event 201 for the bird flu, that's another 2 months out. Sorry.
No worries.
6 weeks out, because it's on 2nd and 3rd August that they have this summit in Virginia somewhere.
Right.
About the bird flu, where they're going to decide that's the bad thing. Now we have to react to that. So they, they're really all over the place. But what all these events have in common is that they're triggers for states of emergency.
Yes.
Global states of emergency, either due to war escalations
or some kind of medical or a medical
pandemic,
event.
which again is a war escalation against an invisible enemy that's everywhere. but like the pandemic is supposed to put us on a war footing. That's what Mario Draghi said in 2021 when the thing happened. I think it's 29 March 2021. Mario Draghi's op-ed in the Financial Times. Everybody should read that. Everybody should have that on their local drive, because that was the bankers' coup in writing, black on white. Anyway, so that was kind of the gist of my article. All of these things have, like, who cares about Mpox? Who cares about COVID? Who cares about the Palestinians, about the Israelis, about the Ukrainians, about the Russians? They don't care about any of this. They're just lighting the fuses because they want to create mayhem. It's like the guy who can't pay his bar tab, and then he starts a general fight so he can weasel his way out.
Well, I think what really blew me away, and all of this is phenomenal, right? This is reading the way the tea leaves are all these things are laying out a pattern of behavior with these people. What was really blew my mind about the stuff you were talking about on Vanessa's podcast, and then also on your Substack, was that, and it's stuff that we touched on the last time you and I did a podcast together with Crypto Rich, as we were just kind of brainstorming as to what's going on here, because it just feels like there's this series of events getting ready to do something, and when we were like unpacking the yen carry trade unwind, and I was looking at the currency crosses and all of these things, I just threw out there, I'm like, this feels like there's some kind of liquidity crisis brewing. And I remember you reacted to me, saying, well, what was the point of curse them? Well, it was clearly to ensure that that peace didn't break out, because as we've been talking about for months, myself and you and others, and then going back to the things that Martin Armstrong has talked about for a couple of years now, which is that they need a war to cover their default. Well, what you've just laid out for us are the mechanisms by which the default is beginning, because this may even tie into the podcast I did with Mitch Altino and Joe Hoft about the end of LIBOR quoting at the end of September. There's all this stuff happening now, and then talk to me about how much money the Brits are in Dutch to the Ukrainians on, and who's liable to, what's the liability of default? Because when you started at the beginning of this podcast, and you mentioned the $61 billion aid package that got stalled in the Mike Johnson controlled House, that's where the panic started. That's when the real, I could feel it back then, that was a real panic moment. Everybody was like, no, you have to pass this money. I'm like, why? Oh, because someone needs to get paid, because someone's counterparties are going to blow up, because someone is levered along, because someone this, because someone that. And so to me, when you brought that up, I'm like, oh, of course, that's why they were panicking so hard, because now here we are a few months later. They need the money. The money hasn't really shown up yet. And what are they going to do because they know they have to default, but they don't have the conditions for it. So they're now creating the conditions for that, knowing full well that Ukraine was going to default, but they were expecting to have another $60 billion to extend and pretend through the election. And I don't think they're there. So pick it up from there, because the amount of money that the Brits are on the hook for here, and how it pertains to the Bank of England and all this stuff. I read your work, and so I know what you're talking about, but I want you to go through it mechanically here, Alex, and then we'll talk about where we think it's going to go from there.
So this is, again, a little bit of dot connecting and guesswork, but I'm going to start with a guess that it's a lot more than we know. Okay, fair. So supposedly Ukraine's debt to private bondholders is just shy of $20 billion, okay, with a weighted average interest rates of 7.54% on the nominal value of the bonds.
Right.
Which makes their interest charge about 1.5 billion a year. Ukraine's total external debt is supposedly $101.5 billion. Now, who's on the hook for that? we know that these $20 billion is it's companies like BlackRock and Amundi in France and PIMCO, and there's probably a lot of British pension funds who are on the hook for that.
Yes.
There's and you know, okay, so let's go back. Okay, so before I go back to 2022,
Sure.
Liz Truss, right? I wanted to point out that the amounts of money that were given to Ukraine were probably more than we know, because at the time when the US government was saying that, oh, we gave $90 billion to Ukraine, which was, I don't know, late 22, 23 something,
hmm
the Ukrainians themselves were saying, oh, we got $180 billion from the US.
Right.
So it's to be expected that they're going to lowball
Of course.
how badly on the hook they are. So I'd say let's be conservative. Let's multiply it all by 2.
Yeah. I mean, when you start, if you just think about the amount of money that flows through American NGOs, for example, that would be off budget stuff, and other things that don't flow through the Defense Department or through the State Department. There's any number of ways that you can get a couple $100 billion of U.S. taxpayer money over 2 years into Ukraine. Not even difficult to conceive of that.
So what we know is that the British government gave Ukraine close to $10 billion in military aid. Right. And they gave him another $6.5 billion in financial aid. That's what we know. That's what's in the British government's official documents. Okay, if you go to their government website, that's what you'll find. Then what we find out from places like World Bank is that Britain had guaranteed multiple tranches of World Bank loans to Ukraine. So they're on the hook for that too, even though the money supposedly was given by the World Bank, but it wasn't really. They just kind of funneled it that way. Then I think that God only knows how much of the British of the Ukraine government bonds were forced onto British pension funds. Mm-hmm. And then, going back to 2022, so that was when Liz Truss came into 10 Downing Street. She became the prime minister. She brought in Kwasi Kwarteng as her chancellor of the exchequer, right? Mm-hmm. And then on the 22 September 2022, he presents his mini budget to the parliament, right? And the markets go berserk, and the gilt and the pound sell off sharply.
Right.
And what happens is the British pension funds get hit with margin calls.
Yes.
Who knew? Well, that means they were leveraged.
Yes.
They had leveraged exposure to the gilts.
Yes.
Isn't that the craziest thing? Like, what?
I live in the U.S., Alex. I know that this is the situation for many state pension funds. It has been for a long time. It's something we've dealt with in the past as well, in the reinsurance industry, going back to Lehman Brothers and all this stuff. So
yeah, it's insane. But anyway, so in order to meet their margin calls, the pension funds started suddenly going to this stampede of selling off their gilts mm-hmm. to have the cash with which to meet the margin calls.
Right.
And so within 5 days, by 27 September, there's no more buyers for long-dated gilts. There's no buyers.
Yes.
So the pension funds are trying to sell them, but nobody wants them.
Right.
So there was the risk that the price of the gilt was going to just like go off a cliff.
Yes.
So the Bank of England had to step in,
mm-hmm.
and they had to buy $40 billion worth of government bonds.
Yep.
At that point. That's what the Bank of England subsequently informed the British Parliament that they bought 40 billion worth of British government bonds. And they stepped in the last moment, because in the night between 27th and 28th of September, the system came within hours of complete collapse.
Yep.
All right. So that's what we know. But then the funny thing in Britain is that if the Bank of England loses any money on these assets that it holds, so they buy British government bonds, and the British government bonds collapse, and the Bank of England loses money on those bonds. Well, His Majesty's Treasury has to reimburse the Bank of England for those losses. They have to make the bank whole, which means that the British taxpayer has to reimburse the bank. I mean, this is like piracy, high street banditry on an industrial scale. So the Bank of England and the owners of the Bank of England hold the collective British population to ransom.
Yes.
For a system that was foisted on them, yes, which is fraudulent, which is immiserating them systematically, and which they themselves have to pay, so that it's like if the slave owner makes a loss on the business that he uses the slave to run, then the slaves have to reimburse him. That's ultimately what this is. So okay, then Bank of England.
No. I just want to stop you here for just 1 second. I hate to do this, but it just popped into my head, and I need to get this. Like, this is important. This is exactly why when I do the breakdown of the U.S. Treasury International Capital Report, and I see the Bank of England and all the British subsidiaries, the British Virgin Islands, Bermuda, the Caymans, all of these places have been buying U.S. Treasuries like crazy. I've been screaming about the yield curve control across all these asset classes in order to try and get the long end of the U.S. yield curve down. It's not just Janet Yellen trying to bank out, keep the ECB from going bankrupt, but Alex, you're telling me it's also the Bank of England that they're protecting.
Yes.
Holy shit, dude.
Yeah. And so to wrap up this reimbursement, because I looked into how much money this is. So about a year ago, Financial Times published an article in which they quote that the Bank of England has informed His Majesty's Treasuries that by 2033, they are expected to receive a reimbursement of 150 billion pounds, which was up from the previous estimate of 100 billion pounds. And who knows by now? It could be more.
That's why they want Powell. That's why they want Powell to free and go back to the zero bound. They've been buying all these U.S. Treasuries at 4% and 5%. They want Powell to go back to 2%, so they can sell the bonds off at a profit to pay off their losses. Holy shit!
I guess that
would make sense to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. But meanwhile, okay, so if you take that number, 150 billion pounds, let's call it that. It's probably more now.
Sure, it's probably more.
You divide it by the population of Britain, and you get the number of 2,420 something pounds per man, woman, and child living in the UK, which is a ransom. What else do you call it? This is a ransom.
Of course.
Anyway, and then you look at the British, at the kind of like the structure of the British economy, and you realize that okay, so only about half the population is in the workforce. 33.1 million people actually work.
Right.
But of those 33 the GDP, 45% of British GDP is government spending.
Mm-hmm.
And government spending, by definition, is taxpayer funded.
Right.
And the government's running a budget deficit, and their debts keep going up. So not only it's just insane. And so anyway, you can. It turns out to be about £10,000 per employee working in the private sector, meaning, like not people who are in a private company, but they earn all of their money as government contractors. I mean, just like the part of the economy that's actually private enterprise that actually generates wealth for Britain, that's about quarter of the economy.
Right.
No, sorry, I should.
Quarter of the population.
I think it's half the economy. It's quarter of the population.
Right.
That's preposterous. That's unpayable. So where does that lead? It leads to debt jubilee, which they will not grant.
Right.
It leads to a revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to avert revolution, what do? Well, you have to pen the population into, I don't know, something like small where you can control them. Like you create these zones where maybe like everything is within 15 minutes. Like, you call them 15-minute cities. And you make sure that nobody goes out of there unless they have a reason for it and government permission, and only at certain times of day or whatever. And then everywhere you put up these cameras that control all this. And then you also make sure that people can't express their opinions, that they can't gather and protest. Mm-hmm. You also force them to have a digital ID so they can be tracked all the time, everywhere, for everything they do and everywhere they go. And then when you have all that in place, then you can completely wipe the slate clean and give people a CBDC.
Yep.
And preferably, you also orchestrate a big war on the continent. Mm. So all the fighting age men that you can get slaughtered, you send them off to the Eastern Front to get slaughtered, so that you only get the old men, the women, children, and they have to do. There's nobody to push back. There's nobody to fight back. It's as old as the hills. The Romans used to do this exactly. Barbarians at the gate. The Russians are coming. We have to go to war against Russia. Yep. And so, anyway.
No, Alex, what you've just laid out is exactly what you've just worked out their plan. And it's funny, we've invoked V for Vendetta a couple of times in previous podcasts about this, and it's interesting. Alan Moore, the original writer of the comic V for Vendetta, not just the movie. Everybody knows the movie, but very few have actually read the comic book. And I do actually absolutely recommend everybody read the comic book for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that if you think the movie's good, the comic's even better. But Alan Moore, the writer of V for Vendetta, described the story of V for Vendetta as England, a story about between anarchy and fascism. Okay. And he was not happy with the movie because he felt it was and Alan Moore's famous for not liking anybody adapting his work because he's a curmudgeon and it's who he is. And anybody who knows Alan Moore's work well knows that this is a typical thing with him. He has his name removed from any film adaptations of his work and everything else. But what he said was in a couple of interviews that I read with him about this is that the problem he had with the screenplay of the movie was that it was a proxy for America. That what had been done to his story about England, his story of England and fascism, right, had been turned into an Americanized version with, taking the voice of the party and turning him into a Rush Limbaugh figure and all this stuff. And I'm like, but really interesting, Alan, is that what Alex just laid out is actually happening in Britain. Everything. So the story itself, what he wrote was specifically about England and was adapted by the Wachowski brothers / sisters, whatever you want to call them today, into a more not Americanized version of that story. But what they did was they broadened it to a more universal story as a film, because it still wound up coming back to England anyway. And as I tell everybody now all the time, whenever I'm doing one of these podcasts, I'm looking at a picture of V on the far wall of my, surrounded by a bunch of stormtroopers, by the way, right above my drum set. And that's what I found this picture, and I'm like, oh, I'm absolutely having this as a piece of art on my wall in my office. So I wanted to interject that because it's really kind of important background on all of this, because we're all going to see this, but it's exactly playing out. Go watch V for Vendetta again. Go watch the process. And Keir Starmer is now John Hurt. And, you know, I mean, it's playing out in Europe. It's playing out in Germany. It's playing out in France. It's playing out in the United States. It's a universal process that's going on here. It's not just, you know, not just particularly England, but I found it really ironic that in the end, it's going to come to England before it ever came to the United States. Well, and maybe only by a couple of months, you know, the way things are going over here. So I want to go back to what you popped into my head as you were describing all this, which is that this is why everybody, again, I want to just reiterate this point, that everything that Alex just said actually winds up supporting the arguments that we've been making for a long time about all roads lead to London, and why the Federal Reserve is the target of all of this. Because at the end of the day, and I'm going to give this back to Alex in just a second to put the finer point on it, which is that England doesn't have a deep banking system. You know, we have 14,000 different banks in the United States. England's got, what, 5? Right? Maybe, you know, a few community banks. That's about it, right? So if one of those goes down, it's going to create some kind of at least intracontinental problem in Europe, and possibly you know, come across the pond over here into the United States. And so I you know, this is why everybody and their brother has been screaming at Jerome Powell for 2 years. Don't do this. Don't go to 5.5%, and don't hold it here. And maybe, and so I find this really interesting as to where we are now, 3 weeks away from the next Fed meeting, where he said he's going to cut, but we don't know by how much. So, but take it away, Alex.
Well, yes, you're quite right to point out that Britain has a very fragile banking system, because the banking system in England has been so consolidated for so long that now I think you have something like 90% of all deposits are all with the big 5 banks. Mm-hmm. And so if we never mentioned the repos, right?
Yeah, we haven't even gotten there.
We can go there. We haven't go there. So let's go to the timeline again. 22 July was the day when the Ukrainian government announced the deal with the bondholders. Mm-hmm. You know, disaster averted, everything's going to be fine. Look over there, the Russians are coming, right? That very same day, the Bank of England announces some seminar about the future of Bank of England's balance sheet.
Right.
Where they're going to announce the new thinking about how to manage the balance sheet, and they feature the speech by this director of markets, Victoria Saporta, who announces a demand-led system of managing the reserves. And the title of her speech is "Let's Get Ready to Repo," because she says that you know, the bank will have to start accepting a much broader range of collateral to provide liquidity to the British economy, i.e., the banking system.
Yep.
And what that means basically is that they're going to be accepting all kinds of like they're creating a basis for taking anything in repo exchanges as money good collateral, and giving whoever posted that collateral cash.
Yep.
Which could be, I don't know, Ukraine bonds.
Maybe.
Maybe. Let's, like, who knows? But basically, that would mean that whoever holds those Ukraine bonds, which I don't know what they're worth, but I looked up when I was researching for my article, they were at maybe like 40 cents, 46 cents, which is still pretty good. But when the markets wrap their heads around all this, those bonds should go into low double digits, into single digits. Maybe once Ukraine loses the war, they're going into single digits. They're going to be, they're going to be bone pickings for the vulture funds. That's where they're going. But with let's get ready to repo, it means that people who hold those bonds are going to be able to get 100 cents on the euro, 100 cents on the dollar.
That's right.
From the Bank of England, right?
Yep.
Which means that the whole system is going to pay for those losses. It means that they're going to print up so much money that the system is going to go into hyperinflation possibly, or at least very high inflation, which means that they're going to rob the whole population of the UK, and everybody who holds pound denominated assets is going to get screwed in the back end.
Yes, no, absolutely. Yeah, it actually even dovetails into what you just said previously about the $160 billion the Bank of England is set to lose, because now you can triple that figure or you can quadruple that figure, because the Bank of England is going to pay those repos out at par, and then those repos are going to be quietly just constantly rolled over, and then eventually those bonds are going to go to zero, and then they're not going to be unwound, right? And the Bank of England's just going to turn right around and go, well, no, we have to default on all, we have to just eat all that, and then we're going to have to just issue a new currency. Britain's gone broke, at least twice in the past. And both times they did it, they did the George Soros thing about we issue consols. Like, they need a means by which to default on the debt, stiff all the bondholders. So the gilt market, what you're saying, like the end game of this is that the gilt market goes to the gilt market goes to infinity or negative infinity. It goes to zero, and then they're gonna have to restart the whole system, stiff the bondholders, not pay them anything other than a coupon payment in perpetuity. Again, just like the Brits have done in the past. And we're always staring at the same situation over and over and over again with these people.
Yeah. Well, the reason why we are staring at the situation over and over and over again is because the system is designed exactly to lead to that end.
Yes.
The ultimate with the monetary systems that we have throughout the world, the collapse, the ultimate collapse of the system is a mathematical certainty.
Well, it's even funnier you say this, right? And I don't know why I didn't connect these dots earlier, but now I'm going to connect one for you. Let's go back to Brown's Bottom. Who in Europe doesn't have any fucking gold reserves? UK.
Bank of England?
The UK. Gordon Brown sold all their gold reserves at the bottom, marking the bottom of the gold market at $249 an ounce, or roughly. What he sold it for, $244, whatever the hell the number was. It was less than $300 an ounce. They can't even recapitalize their banking system through allowing the price of gold to rise. So the higher the price of gold rises, it makes Britain even less investable. It turns Britain into Ukraine, which is, of course, exactly why. Oh, and why do you think Javier Milei in Argentina just sent all of Argentina's gold to England?
Yeah, how funny how did that work out?
No, I wonder. Yeah, I'm doing the Dr. Evil thing behind the scenes because there's audio on the podcast. So.
Why would anybody do such a thing? It's like,
unless you work for them. I've never trusted Milei from the beginning. I always thought he was straight out of Central Casting as the cartoon Austrian economist.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you recognize that, because
I recognized this ages ago. I looked at him and I went, "Oh, fuck off, dude!" Like, no one actually speaks like that, other than a few guys over at the Mises Institute, and come on, these people don't exist in real life.
Yeah. And I gave up because, Milei has like a fan club, like
Mm-hmm.
people who every time he says something is like, oh,
Yeah,
so
no.
wise, so wise, so true, so true. And if you say like, but wait a minute, this is not, like you point out something and you say like, why would he say this or why would he do that? Then they immediately, how do you call it? They dismiss you. They're like, oh, you're a communist or whatever, like
Yeah,
some
no.
dis-
They get Gallup away from the core issue, and you just say, look, but they point to, oh no, he got inflation down or he got this down. Like, yeah, dude, that was the easiest thing in the world to fix in Argentina. The bigger problem is that he just literally sold the country out completely.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
as always, like it's nothing new that they're being pied them creating Pied Pipers to freeze people in place is nothing new. It's a time worn strategy. It's nothing new here. And it's funny. I listen to this stuff, and to me, Zelensky is just becoming is looking more and more like um, Richard Poe's assessment of Leon Trotsky. I'm
oh yeah,
reading
oh
Richard's
yeah,
book
oh
right
yeah.
now, how the British created communism and blamed it on the Jews. And by the way, everybody should, whether you hate Jews or not, whether you should read the book at the very least just to see the secular British angle on all of this, just to understand another frame of reference about all this. This is not to take the Rothschilds out of the equation or anything like that. But again, evil knows, goes beyond any particular ethnicity, is the way I like to put it. And Trotsky was absolutely, a very, very compromised figure who always seemed to do exactly at the right moment and the right time. He was always there getting exactly what the British wanted and not what the Russians wanted. And not even what the Bolsheviks wanted. And eventually that's kind of the reason why why Stalin had him killed. So there's these things are very murky and they're very deep and they're very ugly, and we don't call them perfidious Albion for no reason. And so if you can understand why they need to constantly push the war narrative, it is, and then to try and get their opponents or their current boogeyman, their boogeyman du jour, which in this case would be Hamas and or Iran and or the Russians, into doing what poker players would call getting them into the state of on tilt, getting them to do something dumb, right? So that then the response can always be, well, we're the goodies.
Yeah.
And we're in the moral high ground, and we can wrap ourselves in the moral high ground. Now, again, I'm not taking sides here in any of the other conflicts. The Russians have got blood on their hands. The Ukrainians have blood on their hands. The Israelis, the Gazans, the Iranians, everybody has blood on their hands. But the people themselves in every one of these countries, every one of them, are the real victims here of all the big power politics, of the people who are desperately trying to prop up and or manipulate a failing system to then see themselves in control of the whatever new system comes up out of the ashes. And that's the way you have to frame this, because that's the way they're thinking about this game. Okay. That's the way they're playing the game. And it doesn't, and your emotions about who is more or less right and wanting revenge against somebody else is almost irrelevant, sadly. I mean, and I say that with no degree of sadness and or empathy, or no lack of empathy for everybody who has been or is to be killed. But you have to analyze these systems and these events from their perspective, from the oligarch's perspective, which is what Alex has done today, I think, very, very well. And I think it's something that we all need to just wrap our heads around. So I don't know, man. Go ahead.
Two things. So I want to talk about the Jews very briefly, but then your audience are mostly people who invest money, and they're going to want to know
what to do.
Well, what do we do now? So I want to spend a minute on that, because
absolutely, we should do that.
This definitely opens a massive opportunity for a significant windfall. But anyway, on the account of Jews, I don't think anybody should be hating Jews, because what we see going on in Israel is the ugliest thing I ever thought I would experience in my life.
Right.
Okay. But look at who's pushing back against it. Let's just name a few names. Max Blumenthal, Gabor Mate, Aaron Mate. Damn, now I'm gonna. I swear, I know like 24 names like that. Now I'm blanking out. But,
Sure.
But Norman Finkelstein, Miko Peled, Gideon Levy, and they are speaking out in very clear, very categorical term, very strongly, with their humanity fully intact. Let's go back to the biblical time. We were warned about those who pretend to be Jews, yet they pray at the synagogue of Satan.
Mm-hmm.
So let's make sure not to put all the Jews in the same basket, because they don't belong. So that's
even Martin Armstrong today in a private blog post that he put up on his website, he's asking this question, like, why are they doing this? What are the neocons doing? Like, they're trying to start World War III. They're trying to kill everybody. And he was bringing up, and he went back to the Third Temple and went through history and all of this stuff. And even Martin was like invoking that stuff now. Our mutual friend Faisal has done the scriptural work to look at the eschatological angle on this as to, is somebody, and Martin actually brought this, is somebody just running a script here? Are they using scripture to mask what they actually want to do, which is a very cynical, just power grab? Is it just that cynical and that awful? It's something worth considering for everybody to really wrap their heads around and take their emotions out of their analysis and put them aside for a little while. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's hard to do. It's so hard to do.
But this whole shit show.
There are no good guys here, folks. There's no good guys here. There's just a whole bunch of bad. There's just a whole bunch of relatively bad people.
But the people who have cooked up this whole shit show are exactly those who pretend to be Jews, yet they pray at the synagogue of Satan. And they don't shy from posing in front of paintings that they own, which are titled Lucifer summoning his troops. Hello. I mean, like, can it get any obvious? Can it get any more obvious? And then that exact same company
at a certain level, they're rubbing our noses in it, Alex. And
exactly. They're like, hey, we're doing it. We're doing it out in the open. We spit in your face, and what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, exactly.
And then if you say something about it, they're like, oh, that's not fair. That's like they're jolly good fellows, and so say all of us. Don't. Anyway, so let's go to how to make money out of this, Tom, because
sure.
If this blight on the face of humanity is going to go falling down, and there's a way to make money for it, then good riddance. And so here's my take. It is going to be really, really simple. So historically, when these episodes unfold, three things happen. The nation debts goes to zero, as you already mentioned. The nation's currency goes to zero, as you already mentioned. So that's two trades. The equity markets usually go vertical, but you have to hedge the currency exposure. And the credit derivative swaps are going to widen.
Yep.
And 5, which we didn't touch upon, but I think we may as well, is oil.
Yep.
Crude oil. Because when Zelensky was in London and participated in the summit of European political community, they concluded the event apparently with an agreement that they were going to target Russia's shadow tanker fleet, which consists apparently of 600 vessels that help Russia evade Western oil sanctions. So, they are going to be attacking these oil tankers around the world. And I bet you that the Russians are not just going to sit there and think like, well, shit, now we have to build another tanker or buy one. They're going to strike them back.
Of course they are.
So there's going to be another proxy war, apparently, on oil traffic around the world, and the tankers are going to be getting struck. So what's going to happen? Insurance is going to go through the roof. Oil price is going to go through the roof. And Russians don't mind. They're exporting oil, right? So if the oil price goes up, oh well, I guess we're gonna have to charge you more.
Right. Well, I mean, there's that, and then and we can tell you the tanker day rates are already like pretty tight. They've been flat for about the last year because I follow this market not closely, but I follow it well enough because we've got exposure to it in the Gold, Goats, and Guns portfolio, and I rightly made a call on this back in 2022. But it's only going to get worse from here. And and in this credit environment, there's not a lot of new builds in the pipeline for new ships. Okay. Like, because the entire shipping industry is gun shy about what's going on. Pax Americana, as enforced, maritime trade in the form of Pax Americana, is breaking down, meaning other navies are going to have to come in to indemnify the global oil trade and the global goods trade around the world. One of the benefits of the American empire to the entire world, by the way, and some of the big that we demanded for our, as our insurance money, it would be a real shame if your dry weight tonnage, didn't make it across the Pacific Ocean. But that's what we did. Y'all had to pay for our Navy. Y'all had to pay for part of that, and so we got paid for that, and we gave it out, and maybe to our own detriment, and maybe we overspent on it or whatever. But the wealth accrued to the global economy from the United States Navy making the world safe to do global business was an immense dividend to the entire world, including China, including Southeast Asia, including India, including everybody. And
because if you sent a ship from point A to point B, it arrived there safely.
It arrived there safely.
Now piracy is on the rise. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and maybe it cost you a little bit of money on the back end and a little bit of fealty to the United States on this or that. And did we abuse that trust over time? Of course we did. Is anybody trying to just a little bit? I mean, no, like a lot. We did. No argument there. And are we going to pay for that in the long run? Absolutely, we are. And again, no good guys here. I'm just talking about, there are multiple ways to see all of these issues, and you don't have to agree with any of them to look at them and to analyze their benefits, their costs, their benefits, their strengths, their weaknesses. It is what it is. So now, with piracy on the rise, with the American Navy well past its point of maximum potency, with ships that are way overdue for maintenance and scuttling and rebuilding and all the rest of it. Who's going to fill that in? And now now the Ukrainians and the Europeans are going to go to war against the tanker fleet, the oil tanker fleet around the world. Yeah, oil is definitely going to go to $200 a barrel under that scenario. Like it's not even hard, and then that has downstream effects of everything else. And so now you're looking at commodity cost push inflation everywhere.
Yeah.
And a second round of it.
There you go.
Now, and that's going to tie into, and we can look at one other thing I'll throw out there. With gold breaking out to the upside as everybody's currencies are starting to collapse. The ratio of gold to oil, how many barrels of oil you can buy for an ounce of gold, that ratio is pretty freaking high right now. I haven't done the math, but it's getting worse by the day as they've suppressed the price of oil to try and keep Europe afloat. They've suppressed the price of oil to try and keep, even to a lesser extent, even like Japan afloat. But the price of gold is breaking out, and so the gold to oil ratio is the number of barrels per ounce of gold that's rising rapidly, and that always mean reverts always. So
either the gold price goes down or the oil price goes up, and I think
right. It has to be if we're also talking about bond default, sovereign debt crises, all the rest of it. There's no way that we're going to be seeing the price of oil go to $30 a barrel, not unless we want to have a massive credit deflation and everybody and all the central banks go bust.
that's not even possible. I mean, that's theoretically possible, but it's
It is.
politically impossible. No,
Politically,
nobody
it's
will
not
do
going to
this.
happen.
Nobody will
No,
do this.
no one has. Very few people in this world have the appetite for that world, for that outcome. In that respect, again, I believe that's what should happen. I think there should be a wealth transfer back from the oligarch banking class back to the people. And in a credit deflationary environment, that's exactly what I believe. If anybody wants to know where my radicalness really manifests itself, it's in that. So I'm like, no, man, we need deflation. Like, we need massive deflation. Fuck these people. They've created what Steve Hogarth, how he put it in one of Marillion's songs. There's the haves and the have nothings. We don't even have the haves and the have nots. We have the haves and the have nothings. And from my perspective, I'm like, yeah, that's unacceptable. So it's either
that's Britain, man. That's Britain.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you know that I just read this week or last week they had a poll in which 25% of the British people said that they were going to have to switch off their heating this winter to survive financially.
Yes.
Off. And 48% of them said off or down, meaning maybe we'll heat a little bit, but that's half the freaking population.
And their leadership, as you pointed out in your article. By the way, I'm going to pimp Alex's article here because he brought this up as well. The leadership in Britain is telling them, well, you're probably going to have to suffer and you probably don't deserve to heat your homes or whatever it was. There's like a number of them are like, this is what you're going to have to do to save England. They're like, no, fuck you.
Suck it up.
Like, England prevails. This is the England prevails. This is the V for Vendetta thing. No.
Yeah.
Party leader. So.
Yeah. But it's going to be bumpy. It's going to be bumpy, and unfortunately, England may be the closest one to the drain among all the nations that are circling the drain.
Right.
Europe and Japan are not far behind. I think the only country that's in the end, the only country in the West that it's in the end is going to have the resilience to save itself is going to be the United States.
And that's only if we regain political control over our situation here. And ultimately, I'm not even sure that we're going to be able to do that. So not with Biden, not with DNC at the helm. No, because with DNC at the helm, it's just going to be your colony. You're again a colony of Great Britain. Yes, and the French to a lesser extent. Yes, I mean, without a doubt. So, thank you, Alex. I really appreciate you coming on, dropping in. This everybody knows. I pinged Alex yesterday morning or yesterday afternoon, and he got back to me literally this morning. He said, "I've got time today." I'm like, "Absolutely, not waiting."
But I already knew the answer because I already put in my before I answered you, I put in my article. I'm going to be talking about this with Tom, which I knew was going to be a lot of fun and very interesting.
Yeah, as always, Alex, it's a great thing, and thank you for taking the time. I know it's late, so I'm going to let you go, so you can get some sleep, well earned, and we'll talk again soon, my friend.
Thank you. Take care. Bye, Tom.
Well, that'll about wrap it up for episode 190 of the Gold Goats and Guns podcast. I want to really thank Alex Krainer for. Dude, just being Alex, like he just fucking killed it with this analysis of what's going on with the UK and Ukraine and what it means for all of us. This is I think this is one of the most important podcasts I've ever been a part of, and I've been a part of a lot of them, and I'm really proud to have been able to host Alex and walk him through this stuff again. So as always, you can follow me at my blog over at goldgoatsandguns.com. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. You can follow Alex at Naked Hedgie on Twitter as well as this Substack over at Alex Krainer's Trend Compass. And as always, if you want to help us pay the bills around here, you can sign up for the Patreon over Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns, where we do the twice weekly market reports, states of the general market, as well as bespoke chart reads for people, news of the day, as well as the Gold Goats and Guns monthly investment newsletter, where we tie all of this up into a portfolio strategy of help you make sense of this world that's truly, truly going mad. So with that said, I'm out. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk real soon. Keep your stick on the ice.